Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Many of us, as we tune into the show and we walk about life, try to discover who we really are. That is, you and I and all humanity. After all, the health, harmony, and joy we experience in life depends on the answer to this question for many people. Well, back in the day, a woman by the name of Mary Baker Eddy, who founded the Christian Science Church, had profound insight into the nature of God as infinite love. Moreover, Eddy realized that this was the basis of Jesus' healing works. To the degree that we understand our identity as purely spiritual, knowing that each of us shines, now and eternally, as a unique expression of infinite love, we are experiencing healing. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is our guest who's going to share with us a clearer view of you. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Lyle Young. Lyle, thank you for being on the program today.
Hi, Daniel. How are you doing? Thanks for the introduction.
Doing well, and I'm curious how this all started for you on your journey. What was sort of the awakening or that pivotal moment for you?
Sure. Thanks, and hello to all of the listeners of Beyond 50. I learned of Christian Science when I was in university, and I was very interested in religion and philosophy. And then I heard from an acquaintance that this particular professor was a member of the Christian Science Church, and I was very interested. So one time I just kind of cornered him, and we'd had very interesting conversations about current events. And I just kind of said, what's Christian Science all about? And he didn't explain much, but what he did do was he invited me to a meeting of students of Christian Science. There was an organization on campus, and he said, by going there and attending meetings, you'll learn more from the students and the way they're practicing it than from my explanations. So that's what I did, and that was really the start of it. And I should say, just to help perhaps clarify things for listeners, that Christian Science is a Bible-based religion that was started in the 19th century, actually, by Mary Baker Eddy, and she lived from 1821 to 1910. So at any rate, that was the start. I began attending those meetings at that university, and then when I graduated not that long after that, I began attending Christian Science church services and meetings, and that was the start of it for me, Daniel.
Now, was it kind of a flash, or was there a series of events that actually happened that really kind of grabbed a hold of your attention and really gave you the conviction to move forward?
That's a very thoughtful question. I think it was just a kind of just seemed right because of what Christian Science teaches about about the supremacy of God, the supremacy of good, and how that kind of it gives you the practical tools to deal with challenges and to deal with, you could say, even evils in life. Evils could be, injustices in society. Evils could be, perhaps a fight, somebody seeing you at work in not a way that's helpful. But in Christian Science, also, the religion also teaches that you can overcome illness on the basis of the allness of God and the supremacy of God. And there's a kind of a moral authority in harmony and just the sheer rightness of harmony. So I would say, I studied the religion for about 3 or 4 years before really becoming active. So in that sense, it was a little bit gradual, Daniel.
I spent some time actually reading into and discovering, I guess, Christian Science, and it was really unique sort of coming through the back door, and I was really refreshed by the language of it, considering that it was right around the turn of 1900, and realizing how they weren't so motivated to be politically correct as much as they were more interested in being direct about the message. And that was very refreshing, especially when you consider today's self-help world where you get, books 200 to 400 pages full of fluff, and whereas this seemed to be very direct, and to me it made a lot of sense. And, as I was thinking about this, I also understand, too, that you began personally taking one newspaper each week to pray about the issues described. and very quickly knew that doing this only once a week wasn't enough. Tell us about what was going on there and what you were hoping for as you were doing that.
Sure. Okay, so when I learned of Christian Science, it seemed to me that, well, if I was going to be Christian, I was raised in a Protestant church, but I never had really considered myself particularly to be Christian. But if I was going to be Christian, and Christian Science is very definitely Christian in terms of the reverence of Jesus, the virgin birth, the resurrection of Jesus, those fundamental teachings. If I was going to be Christian, then I should use the tools that a Christian has at his or her disposal to improve the world, and that, to me, is really prayer. And this was in the 80s, and I thought, well, if I were very interested in the environmental movement or wanted to be very active in that, I'd probably spend 5 or 10 hours a week, maybe stuffing envelopes or going door to door or doing something. Couldn't I spend that amount of time just praying for the world? And so that's what I began to do. And I began just taking a newspaper a week and just praying for all the article, praying for all of the situations and so on described in the articles, everything from the political pages to the finance pages to movies, fashion, sports, everything. Because I just thought, well, prayer is a tool, and there's a way of bringing a spiritual perspective to all of those different activities, to be supportive of all of those good human activities. So, yeah, that was the start of it, Daniel.
It's pretty incredible when people, they think about things that motivate them, especially when it comes to changing the world. And as they step into that arena, they start realizing the sheer size of things. And at first, their idealism carries the motivation forward enough where it seems exciting until they realize this almost becomes infinite. And then all of a sudden, the steam runs out. Maybe they get a little jaded and even skeptical, and in some cases, downright cynical. And I always try to suggest to people, just take one step at a time and do the best you know you can do in this one moment. And in realizing, when you think about all that in Christian Science and the idea of prayer, did you ever find yourself kind of in those realities from time to time?
I think that I'm speaking from a Christian perspective.
Sure.
And I think it's important to be inclusive. To my mind, religion means that which unites us. Almost by its very definition, religion is that which kind of, the word etymologically means kind of ties together. So religion should be a uniting thing, should be an inclusive thing. But speaking specifically just from my own perspective as a Christian in general, there are always, in your daily walk with God, if you want to put it in those terms, there are always challenges. But that's been true ever since the beginning of Christianity. If you read the writings of Paul, he went through tremendous challenges, everything from being stoned to being whipped many times in shipwrecks, starving, so on and so forth. So I think, at least as I understand it, the Christian walk is not an easy walk, but because of the joy that it brings, and because of the opportunities to bless other people that it brings, and to serve other people, that makes it all worthwhile. I don't know. Does that answer your question, Daniel?
It does, in actually kind of a unique way, because it allows the opportunity to bring in something that I would like to address for our listeners out there, for those who, let's say, are pursuing a religious practice or a spiritual direction to perhaps not only heal themselves, but maybe find out who they are and what their life's work is. I think that a lot of the suffering that goes on, perhaps in the world, is that we come into this world, we kind of do what we're told to do to make it through the first years of life, and then eventually in our young adulthood years, we're being told, well, this is the direction you need to go now, and we never really spend a whole lot of time, I would say, in the first 30 years of our life, for a lot of people, taking that time to reflect to go inside and listen for the answer to the question, who am I, what am I put here to do, and how do I serve with the special gifts that I have? And that gets frustrating for a lot of people, and we've kind of come to the conclusion on this show some years ago, actually, beyond 50 when you think about it, is that's a time where you hear the sort of cliche, midlife crisis. Because by then I think it's that actual awakening where we realize, okay, I've spent a lot of time doing this that everybody told me I should be doing, and looking for approval and acceptance, that sort of a thing. But I'm frustrated because there's something in me that knows that time feels like it's running out, that it isn't there and infinite like it was when, let's say, we were teenagers. What do I do now? And I'm sure you've come across quite a few people like that, haven't you, during your time?
Sure, I have. And I mean, every moment is an opportunity for us to be listening to the divine, however you want to say that, and to be responding to that, and to be allow ourselves to kind of make ourselves available to being led by the divine, to being led by divine love, if you like, to do what truly is unique for us. And in the talk that I'm going to be giving, and this is a talk that's going to be online on Thursday, December the 3rd, I'm going to be talking about what really makes each of us who we are. That it isn't how old we are or how big we are or the color of our skin, but each of us truly is a unique expression of qualities of this divine love. And it's from that standpoint that we can feel our individual place in the universe and feel the individual calling that we all do have. And I think it's a joy to see how people do find their individual path, and every path is unique and brings a blessing to us and brings a blessing to others.
Now, how would you suggest for people out there who want to discover that, the idea of who I am and how do I move forward with where I'm at now, maybe some ideas, an exercise, or a thought where they can actually do that?
Yeah. Well, there are, as I hardly need to tell you, many different spiritual disciplines and spiritual practices. I can speak myself and say, from my perspective, I found just an in-depth study of the Bible to be extraordinarily useful. And I found an in-depth study of the book that Mary Baker Eddy wrote, her main book, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, just a wonderful tool to understand the Bible in a practical and spiritual way. But I think that there are many different ways to, many different vehicles, I think you could say, to really discover the divine. Paul talks about there being differences of administration, but the same Spirit. And so I think that each of us can turn to God and find the path that is right for each of us. Even something as simple as just being very determined to just take even a few minutes at the start of what will perhaps be a very busy day, just to feel God's presence. And again, you could say the divine, the presence of the divine, and just to know that you are a child of light. This is an important, in my view, an important message of the Bible, that we're children of light, and that that we should, as Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, a city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Let your light so shine before men, they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. So even just taking a little bit of time at the start of the day, just to reaffirm that I am a child of light, that there's protection, there's safety, I can do good, I am motivated by a sincere desire to serve. Just the discipline of taking a little bit of time each day just to do that, it can be really, really useful. And again, speaking personally, I found the Bible and Science and Health to be extremely useful tools in doing this.
Mm-hmm. It's just so fascinating to think about how when a person can actually make that choice to move into being a spiritual being, which they've been the whole time, sort of like you look for the castle, but it's been right there, you've been in it. What do you think it is in this world as we come into it that has people dimming their light or just not acknowledging it altogether, perhaps?
Uh, Again, that's a really good question. And speaking from my perspective, the Bible uses the term the carnal mind, which is enmity against God. It's a kind of a material mindedness that is not really part of anybody. But sometimes that material mindedness would kind of fool us into doing things for wrong reasons, maybe just because we want to make a lot of money, or we just want to be well liked, or we don't want to disappoint people, or uh, but I think it's possible to be really listening more to the divine, and to feel led more by God to truly do that which is selfless and that which is of true and deep and lasting service to others. So from my perspective, I guess it would kind of be that material mindedness that really isn't part of anybody, that would, as you said earlier, Daniel, convince us, well, we just should do this because this is what I'm supposed to do when I'm 20 years old, or this is what I'm supposed to do. But sometimes people play that out well beyond 50. There's a thought, well, if you reach such and such an age, then it's only normal that in terms of your health, this happens, or if you get to this age, then happen. But you see, all of that is just kind of um, giving into what is perhaps a popular thought, but we don't need to accept that. We don't need to accept certain impositions on us and on our individuality if we're in our 20s or if we're in our 80s. There is this sense of ourselves as truly being individual expressions of divine love, eternal and perfect and pure and good. That's the sense of ourselves that we want to love. In New Testament terms, it talks about putting on the new man and putting off the old man, and that's who we want to be, and who we can be.
So I understand that you're also part of the Christian Science lecture series. As you're out there and you're giving talks, what are some common questions you get from other people that might help our listeners kind of open up and maybe take a look at this direction for themselves?
Well, some of the questions relate to, I would say, deep theological questions sometimes. Questions like, why is it that good people suffer? Or why is it that sometimes we try to do something we think will be really good, but it's not really accepted, or it doesn't go anyplace? Or so kind of questions like that are good questions that people often have. I would say questions about, how can I pray in such a way as to really experience healing. But to come back to that first question, in the lecture, I'm going to be talking about how, with this understanding of ourselves as being purely spiritual, as reflections of this infinite love, we can overcome those frustrations and disappointments that I think we all know, those conflicts, big and small, that seem to be so much a part of human life. And also in the talk that I'm going to be giving online, and this again is Thursday, December the 3rd, I'll definitely be talking about how this higher sense of ourselves can allow us to experience a greater wholeness, a greater health, how this wholeness and this health and this well-being are native to who we are as reflections of the divine. As I said earlier, children of light, and children of light include within themselves this wholeness and this wellness.
When you take a look at what's happening here in 2020 with the COVID-19, people being locked down, almost feeling as though, in a lot of cases, their lives and even their dreams being stripped away from people who are just telling them what they think is good for them. What would you say to people like that where they can actually feel the courage to continue taking one step at a time, perhaps one prayer at a time, that this is all temporary. Try to take a direction to see what can you learn from this experience for your own personal as well as spiritual growth.
Well, the human life throws lots of things at us, but if things are tough, sometimes that's really the opportunity to, if you will, show our true colors. And I think as individuals and as people in our own countries, I'm in Canada, you're in the United States, many of your listeners, I'm not sure where they are, they could be from all over the world, but wherever we are, as we approach this pandemic with the sense that, we may need to pivot, we may need to change our activities a bit, but there's still so many opportunities to be of value to others. For example, here in my own city, I have a friend who's a top flight chef who, who does the cooking for visiting dignitaries, because Ottawa is the capital of Canada. There are a lot of dignitaries from other countries who come here, and this whole year basically has been shut down. There haven't been people traveling. There certainly haven't been government officials traveling much, but he just said, well, I'm going to be paid. Why don't I just continue to cook and then just deliver my food to people who are shut in for free, kind of a thing. So it was lovely because it was one way of his being able to use skills that he has in a way that truly brought him joy and truly was a blessing for other people. So there may seem to be so many possibilities shut off because of the virus, but really there are still so many ways to show our love for others and to, in that way, continue to experience joy.
Well, there's somebody who actually takes what seems to be adversity, which for a lot of people it is, realizing, well, perhaps things won't be the same, but here's the opportunity to face the newness with courage. Just kind of find out and see what happens. What's next?
That's it. In the New Testament talks about, Paul writes about forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forth to those things which are before. So that's having an expectation of good. And I think because of God's infinite goodness, I think it's normal to have an expectation of good. And even in the face of all of this, there are lots of positive changes. People are rethinking the way cities should be. They're rethinking even the concept of what work is. Do we have to have people funneled into a small space in the downtown of a city and then funnel back out to the suburbs at the end of the working day, or are there different ways of thinking about how we can be productive in society, shaping streets and more space for pedestrians and for cyclists, and expanding cycling networks, for example. So in other words, it is a challenging time. On the other hand, there may be lasting benefits from it, and in our own personal lives we may go through lots of personal challenges, but each one is an opportunity to grow and to discover within ourselves a strength and a maturity that perhaps we didn't even know we had.
Oh, amazing stuff. Is there a website people can find out more about your work? And as I said, you're going to be doing a lecture here soon online, it sounds like. How they can find out more about that?
Yes. In fact, I suggest your own website, the Beyond50Radio.com website, because we do have, there's a special event listed, and that gives all of the details of the online lecture and how to participate and so on and so forth. Again, the day is Thursday, December 3rd at 7:15 p.m. Pacific time. And you can just go to the Beyond50Radio.com website and get the information on that special event.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here on the program, Lyle. Do you have any parting thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners, especially with these rough times that people are facing?
No, I hope people listen to the online talk. It'll be really just a good opportunity for people to learn new ideas about the discoverer of Christian Science, Mary Baker Eddy, and how she faced adversity in so many ways, and how then in her main book, Science and Health with the Key to the Scripture, she really shares so much of what she learned about following Jesus. But if you're not from a Christian perspective, I still think that the talk would be fascinating for people because it's not a really, how would I say it? It's not really a kind of a denominational talk. It's more of a talk about just to share ideas that I think people from any walk of life and from any different spiritual perspective, ideas that I think people would find helpful.
Well, very good. Thank you so much for being on the program today, Lyle. It was a pleasure.
Okay. Thank you so much, Daniel. All the best in your work.
You bet. We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for joining us. You can discover more at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. We do encourage you to sign up for a weekly e-newsletter and stay up to date with what's going on in the world of Beyond 50 as well as our upcoming shows. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. And remember, wherever you are is where you should be. Have a great day.